Okay, the title that I advertised tonight was From God's Point of View. We're all aware of prejudice, especially in other people. We can all see people's distorted thinking and distorted judgments and evaluations. We rarely think of looking in the mirror, but okay. And since distortion and bias are sometimes subtle and they're sometimes unconscious, a fair person has to worry a little bit about maybe some of his judgments are biased, especially a person who is alert, honest, and self-critical. From time to time, he'll change his mind. By the way, that's something that you could ask some people who put forward a very strong, fanatical point of view. Ask when's the last time you changed your mind? Or the people who don't know what river and what sea. And then, if you do change your mind from time to time, you might ask yourself, well, what will I think 10 years from now? What kinds of things will I have changed my mind on? There's one way to solve this problem in an absolute fashion. If instead of looking at the world and trying to evaluate it from our point of view, if we could only know how it looks from a Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view, how he looks at the world is the way it really is. He's not prejudiced, he doesn't make mistakes, doesn't miss anything. So if we could ever see it the way it looks to him, then we could be sure that we're seeing it in the right way. By the way, there's Rabbi Bachai who says that when you go up on the pilgrimage festivals to the temple, there's a Yira and Yera'eh, for those who know the Hebrew, and he says that when you go into the courtyard on the festivals, you see yourself as he sees you. That would be really, really valuable. Cut through all of the rationalizations and hopes and fears and self-condemnations and all the rest to see you as you really are. Okay, but we're living in our lives. We have real-life situations. Now, there is a way to do this. There's a way to see the situation you're dealing with from a Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view. For the first 1,000 years of Jewish history, that is to say, from the giving of the Torah for 1,000 years, you could go to a prophet. A prophet would tell you, this is the way God sees it, this is what he wants from you. We don't have prophecy anymore. But we have the residue of prophecy. The entire of the Tanakh is what prophets have bequeathed to us. They're the results of, and the Torah Shebaal Peh as well. They're all tradition that started with Moses and continue down. So if we can analyze the situation that we're dealing with from the point of view of the Torah principles that we have, we would be able to see it the way Kodesh Baruch Hu sees it. And if we did that, we did it consistently, I think we would have some surprises. And we would be able to be much more certain of ourselves in the kinds of decisions that we make. So I want to give you some examples of seeing things from Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view in a way which I think is not openly obvious to us, both to communicate these particular cases to you and also to encourage you to carry out this kind of investigation. Go to people who are Talmidei Chachamim, who know the Torah well, and who can help share that point of view with you from the sources that the Torah gives us. Here's the first case. I've decided to work on my hospitality. And in particular, Friday nights, I've decided to look around Shul and see if there's anybody who looks unfamiliar and offer him hospitality. Okay. And Shul, Baruch Hu, sitting down, and then I see him in the corner. There he is. He's not one of our community. Never seen him before. Mark him down. As soon as the last Kaddish is over, I'm going to invite him for Shabbos. Fine. Davening goes through, and the last Kaddish is over, and I pick up my feet, and I start walking in the stranger's direction, only Ruvain is 2 steps ahead of me. Ruvain couldn't possibly be going to the guy in the corner. No. But he keeps walking, and then Ruvain says, Shalom Aleichem, and the guy says, Aleichem Shalom, and Ruvain says, do you have a place to stay? And I'm dying. The guy says, no, I really don't. Could you help me? The Rabbi says, sure, come with me. And they walk out. And how do I feel? He stole my mitzvah. He stole my guest. It's a tragedy. Okay, that's the way I feel. How does the Kodesh Baruch Hu look at it? Well, the stranger got hospitality, and Reuven got the mitzvah, and I get credit for the mitzvah because I wanted to do the mitzvah, and it was beyond my control to do it. From Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view, it's win, win, win. And from my point of view, it's a tragedy. Well, there's something wrong with my point of view, isn't there? I ought to be looking at it from Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view. And then, when I reflect on that, I think, am I ego invested in my ruchnius, in my spirituality? Wouldn't that be a kind of demerit in my spirituality? Sort of, I want to wear a spiritual badge of honor and do it in public, no less. Because offering hospitality in shul is something you do in public. So maybe I should think more carefully about the kinds of things that I stress in my ruchnis, my spirituality, and what they imply about my interactions with other people, and ask when I'm focused on doing something for my spirituality, whether it's what Kodesh Baruch Hu really wants. The Gemara talks about a chassid shota, an insane chassid. The insane chassid is someone who sees a woman drowning and says, I know she's drowning, but it's not, you're not allowed to look at women, so, too bad, you just have to drown. Sorry, that's not the right halacha. So that's an example of asking what it should look like from a Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view. Now here's another one, a well-known principle, was yesterday's Daf Yomi actually, which if you happen to know the literature, you already know God's point of view, but if you don't, many people find it very surprising. Mitzvos can be divided into two categories. I say can because they can divide it into 60 categories or 100 categories, and sometimes there's 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not saying this is it, but this is one way of dividing them. Some are called Mitzvah va'osa. Mitzvah va'osa means, Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I command you to do this. If you do it, you'll be rewarded, and if you don't do it, you'll be punished. It's an absolute command. The other category is En Mitzvah va'osa, which means that I'm offering this to you, I'm inviting you to do it. If you do it, you'll get a reward, but if you omit it, there'll be no punishment. I'm not requiring it of you. Just offering it to you as something which is positive to do, is good to do. Supererogatory, as they call it in ethical studies. Now, which would be religiously the more precious mitzvah? The mitzvah that you are ordered to, obligated to do, with both reward and punishment applying, or the one where you're offered it and the reward is offered, but if you don't do it, there's no penalty. So when I ask this to beginners, without exception, they'll tell you the second category is superior. Why is the second category superior? Well, because in the first category, I'm just doing what I have to do. Part of my impetus to do it is I don't want to be punished. In the second category, since punishment isn't in the picture, doing it shows my appreciation for what's right. It shows my ideals. It shows my nobility. It shows my generosity. Certainly all very important moral and spiritual characteristics. So the second one, the Ein Mitzvah va'osa, what we call the voluntary one, would certainly be superior. Well, having put it to you that way, you know obviously that that's the wrong conclusion. The correct conclusion is that the Mitzvah va'osa, that which is obligatory, is the higher mitzvah, more important mitzvah. So much so that in general, if you have a choice between two mitzvahs to do, one is obligatory and the other is voluntary, you do the obligatory mitzvah. And why should that be? Where did the intuition go wrong? So Tosfos has a very, I would say, straightforward explanation. Tosfos says, and if you think carefully of what he says, you'll see it's a very modern psychological observation. A person who's ordered to do something, required to do it, there's a certain natural resistance, certain natural rebellion. In our world, we'd say, don't tell me what to do. Don't push me around. Don't give me orders. I'm living my own life, making my own decisions. And therefore, you have a Yetzer Hara, you have an evil inclination blocking you from doing that mitzvah, which requires more effort on your part to do the mitzvah. And we have a rule that the more effort is required to be able to do the mitzvah, the more reward you get for doing it. And the Gemara actually says that there's more reward in doing it. So that's why it would be a greater mitzvah. I think a slightly deeper perspective on that is, if Kodesh Baruch Hu offers a greater reward, that's an indication that he cares about it more, right? Not handing him out rewards arbitrarily. And, if he cares about it more, then I should care about it more, because I should look at it the way he looks at it. So that's already a start. But the Ritva, and the Maharal, and others, I shouldn't say but, and in addition, they give it another perspective on it. Ask yourself, if you measure this mitzvah that you're doing, and ask yourself, how much in the mitzvah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the Creator, and how much is me? Because Baruch Hu is giving the mitzvah, and I'm doing the mitzvah. So we're both involved. I'm doing it because he gave the mitzvah. But if you analyze what's going on, the action that I perform, how much in it is of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how much is it of me? Well, if it's Mitzvah Osa, I'm following orders. Where am I coming from? Obedience, duty, recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's authority. That's subservience. I'm living in terms of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. That's basically all that's going on. Or all that needs to be going on in that case. But when it's not ordered, it's not required, it's only offered, and the only consequence that's in the offering is that if I do it, I get a reward, then, as we said 2.5 minutes ago, it's my high ideals, it's my nobility, it's my fine values, it's my generosity. The one word that covers all 4 phrases is mine. There's an awful lot of me in there. A lot of my greatness, my superb spirituality, and so forth and so on. And that means there's much less of a Kodesh Baruch Hu there. And that's precisely why it's inferior. It's inferior because there's more of me and less of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Which would mean that the ideal is to simply act out the Kodesh Baruch Hu's will. The focus is on him, not me. Not I'm noble and I'm idealistic and I have high values. The focus is I want to be an instrument for him. That's all. So that tells you what the height of spirituality is from the Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view. It isn't the development of your nobility. It's your acting out his will. The Ramchal, and the Derech Hashem puts this with a certain thoroughness and certain depth that is not often found. He says every mitzvah contributes to a person's perfection. It elevates something about you and perfects something about you. And of course, if you do a mitzvah, you're doing it as a response to a Kodesh Baruch Hu's will. But not only do you do the mitzvah according to his will, you do the mitzvah in order to achieve the perfection because he wants you to be perfect. That's why you go after the perfection. And this is a challenge specifically for noble-minded people, for whom perfection is an automatic attraction. Perfecting yourself, making use of all your capabilities, using all your strengths, would appeal to certain people, does appeal to certain people who are atheists. Why should the talents that I have be wasted? Wouldn't that be terrible? This way they'll all be used and developed and expressed. That's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants is for you to act out his will. So if you go after self-perfection, it's because he wants you to be perfect. That's why. I don't know if the Nefesh Chaim used that idea from the Ramchal when he said the following. We are told, Rambam says it in Hilchos Shuvah, that the highest service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not for the sake of any reward, including the world to come. It's not for the sake of any reward, even the world to come. Also, it's emes b'tei shehu emes. You do emes because it's emes. Emes doesn't mean true. That's another topic for another occasion. Just because of its own quality that you do it. All right, that my motivation should do it because that's what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. Should I, slightly deeper than I've had it before, should I want Olam Haba? Let alone what motivates me to do the mitzvah. Should I want Olam Haba? The Rambam says yes, in bold letters. He says in the 9th parak that all the greatest Jews of all time, the sages and the prophets, all desired the time of Mashiach because they wanted to get into Olam Haba. So now, how do you reconcile that with the idea that you should only be serving Kodesh Baruch Hu? Olam Haba is the greatest possible position for a human being to be in. And Nefesh Chaim says, I'll tell you how. You have to desire the world to come because he wants you to be there. That's why you desire it. Not because for you it's going to be the greatest possible thing. Because he wants you there. This really follows from the first parak of the Mitzvos also. So the idea of even finding something that's worthy of desire, but desiring because the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants it. So that means the idea of Mitzvah V'osa, the fact that it's his Ratzon, gives it its essence. And the more there is of me in the desiring or me in the performing, the less successful the Ruchnius is. Now we know this from certain examples, right? We say of Moshe Rabbeinu, Shechina medaberes mitoch grono. The Shechina, God's presence, spoke from his throat. Moses was a completely transparent medium. There was nothing of Moses there. He became a vehicle just for the divine message. There's a Pri Tzaddik. The Pri Tzaddik comments when Chazal talk about some prophets saw with an aspaklaria me'ira, which either means a lens or a mirror that's perfectly clear, or ones that were not perfectly clear. And the only one who had a perfectly clear mirror was Moshe Rabbeinu. And he gives the following analogy to where the unclarities come from. Imagine you're in a room at night, in a lit room, and you have windows out to the street, and there may be street lights outside, but it's much more dark outside. So when you look through the window, you see two things. First of all, you see the scene outside, to a certain extent, and you also see a reflection of what's inside the room as well. You get a double image, because that's the way glass works. Now, if you're standing at a right angle to the window, looking straight out, so then the reflection from the window is going to be your reflection. That's what clouds the lens. What clouds the lens is your own reflection in the lens. That's his way of explaining that you get in the way. Whatever you are in the lens gets in the way of your seeing what's going on outside. So I think Moshe Rabbeinu had nothing of himself in the way. There was nothing there. He made himself into a completely transparent medium. That's the highest possible level of of ruchnius, of spirituality, and that's expressed in Mitzvah Osa, because Baruch Hu ordered that it be done, so I do it. Rather than Ein Mitzvah Osa, where it's my nobility and my sensitivity and my fine values, which are expressing when I volunteer to do it, that becomes less spiritual rather than more spiritual. Okay, here's the third example. I'll express it in terms of a dilemma, and see what you think about it, and then I'll show you what the sources say about it. Reuven and Shimon are partners in a car. They share a car. And they try to, be thoughtful of one another. There's a place where they leave notes when they'll need a car, next Thursday at 3 o'clock. And the person puts in a note, so it's understood the other person will see the note, and then he'll avoid using it at that time. That's how they do it. So one day, Reuven gets a request from a friend on Thursday to help him with the car to take his wash to the laundry. 3 o'clock. So he puts a note where they keep the notes. Next Thursday, 3 o'clock, I'll need the car. His partner, Shimon, somehow misses the note, doesn't see it, and sometime later puts in a note, Thursday at 3:30, I'll need the car to take my mother to the hospital. Reuven comes in at 2:45, and he sees his note in the book, and then he sees Shimon's note. Mother to hospital at 3:30. And he thinks, wow, what am I going to do now? If I take the car at 3 o'clock to help my friend get his laundry to the laundromat, the car's not going to be here at 3:30. So he thinks, well, I have a dilemma. On the one hand, I promised. And I put the note there. I did what I'm supposed to do. Poor Shimon somehow didn't see it, and I'm not accusing him of doing something vicious. He just didn't see it, and in all honesty, but I promised. How can I welch my promise to my friend? On the other hand, when you compare helping somebody to go to the laundry and taking your mother to the hospital, it's really a disproportionality in the importance of the two actions. What should I do? Should I fulfill my responsibility that I undertook with my promise? Or what? I should break my promise so that Shimon can do what he needs to do for his mother? How would I explain it to the guy I made the promise to? I know that Shimon's he'll have to take a taxi or get some other way to do it or whatever it is. But in the meantime, you told me you would help me at 3 o'clock. And let's say we live in an area where there aren't taxis. So he'll be in trouble, right? I think it's easy to see that this is a significant moral dilemma, and it could happen in real life. Well, the Gemara has an exact replica of this case. In the beginning of the 6th chapter of Masechta Psachim, the Gemara considers the following case. It's Erev Pesach. People are coming to the temple to offer their Paschal sacrifices. Paschal sacrifice is offered after the afternoon sacrifice. Now, the afternoon sacrifice is the end of all the daily sacrifices, except for something like the Paschal sacrifice, all the individual sacrifices, and the communal sacrifice. Now, on the other hand, poor Shimon has a problem. His problem is that in order for him to participate in the Paschal sacrifice, he has to offer a private sacrifice of his own. He's Mechusa Kippurim. And that private sacrifice has to be offered before the afternoon sacrifice. There is a prohibition of a Kohen offering any private sacrifice after the afternoon daily sacrifice. The Mitzvos to say, Allah Hashem Kol HaKolos Kulam, finish all the private sacrifices before the afternoon daily sacrifice. So here comes Shimon marching into the temple, 20 minutes after the afternoon daily sacrifice has been offered. goes up to the Kohen and says, listen, I need your help. Here's my sacrifice so I can participate in the Paschal sacrifice. Otherwise I can't do it, I'm disqualified. Please, offer it for me. And the Kohen says, gee, I'm awfully sorry. But you see, you're just a little too late. I'm not allowed as a Kohen to offer a sacrifice after the afternoon daily sacrifice. I can't do that. He says, but then I won't be able to participate in the Paschal sacrifice. And the Kohen says, I'm awfully sorry, but I can't help you because that's the rule. Let's go to the rabbi. Let's go to the Beis Din Kohanim. Go to the rabbi, Beis Din Kohanim, and they say to the Kohen, offer his sacrifice. Kohen says, but I'm not allowed to do that. I say, yeah, that's true, you're not allowed to do that. But let's make a little calculation. This is what the Gemara says. A little calculation. You have a simple positive commandment. Finish the sacrifices before the afternoon daily sacrifice. That's a simple positive commandment. This Jew has a positive commandment to participate in the Paschal sacrifice, and that's a positive commandment which, if you violate it, has a penalty of kares, a very, very severe penalty. So if I weigh up the strength of the two commandments, his commandment, the Jew's commandment, far outweighs your commandment, the Kohen. So his command supersedes your command, and you violate your command so that he can fulfill his command. That's not an obvious outcome, but that's the Gemara's outcome. And some may have heard the phraseology of the Gemara in Shabbos and elsewhere. Do we say to a person, sin so that your friend can have a merit? And they assume by the phraseology that the answer is, of course not. But that's not correct. The answer is, of course we do. There are exceptions, but the Gemara has to make, and the Tosfos has to work out what the exceptions are. But under ordinary conditions, when no one's at fault and no one is sloppy and irresponsible and no one is a criminal, we do say, you should violate your mitzvah so that he can fulfill his mitzvah if his mitzvah is objectively greater than yours. One way to conceptualize this, and I'll give you some evidence for this in a minute, one way to conceptualize this is as follows. Okay, the Kohen says, God gave me my mitzvos. He told me what to do, and I have a rule not to offer someone's personal sacrifice after the afternoon daily sacrifice. But my responsibility include his mitzvos also. It isn't as if I have mine and he has his. Too bad for him, Let him go justify or claim that he couldn't have done any better, and it was not his fault. No. My responsibility in the world includes responsibility for his mitzvah. So instead of thinking it of as mine and his, I think of it as mine and mine. I know for sure what I would do if I had both responsibilities. I would say I have one mitzvah that's a plain mitzvah and one mitzvah that carries kares. Of course I would do the mitzvah that carries kares, because it's the bigger mitzvah. Once you collapse the difference between him and me into one, the answer is very simple. The chiddush is to collapse that way. And that's the way Kodesh Baruch Hu looks at it. He looks at it that I have a responsibility, my own personal responsibility for his mitzvah. And then the result comes out that way. That isn't an obvious thing. It didn't have to be that way, but that's the way the Torah looks at it. I'll give you another example. It's Friday night. And I'm at home, and I have my guests, family, make kiddush, make hamotzi, we eat the soup. Knock on the door. Open the door, there's you standing there, and he says, listen, could you please help me? I haven't done kiddush yet. Could you make kiddush for me? So I think, could I make kiddush for him? See, the way this works is when one person makes kiddush and everybody else fulfills his responsibility by listening, it's because the guy making kiddush is doing the mitzvah of kiddush. But I did the mitzvah of kiddush 3/4 of an hour ago. And the next time I will have a mitzvah of kiddush is next Friday night. Oh, thank you very much. The next time I will have a mitzvah of kiddush is next Friday night. I could say the words, I could play act, I can speak them out, but that's not what you need in order to fulfill the mitzvah by listening. You need the person who's saying the words to be doing the mitzvah. And I won't be doing the mitzvah. So my intuitive reaction to the fellow is, I can't help you, I'm sorry. But the Gemara paskins that I can do it. So the question is why? So Rashi says, I would say a bit enigmatically, Rashi says because we have a rule that Jews are responsible for one another. Kol Yisrael, Ravim Zelazeh. We're all responsible for one another. That's why I can do it. Thank you very much. So the question is, okay, we're responsible for one another, but how does that solve the problem? The problem wasn't, I'll abandon him to his fate. I could give him his own siddur. I could give him his own cup of wine. If he can't read Hebrew, I could say the words and he could say them after me. I'm not ignoring him. The question was a legal question. How can I say the words of Kiddush a second time if it isn't the mitzvah and he should satisfy his obligation? That sort of performance requires me to be doing the mitzvah. So the Ran says something quite remarkable on the Gemara and on Rashi. He says, if there's any Jew in the world who hasn't made Kiddush, I have my own mitzvah of Kiddush for him. Not just play acting, not just saying the words. When he comes in the door, that renews my own personal mitzvah of Kiddush. So the Ran says that the Gemara is biting the bullet and saying, you're right. You can only help somebody else if you're doing your own mitzvah. You have more mitzvahs of Kiddush than you thought. And the Ritva takes it a step further and says, from here you see that the whole of the Jewish people is one integrated entity, one body. You know, imagine you have a person who's got an infectious left hand. What's the attitude of the right hand? Oh, there's the left hand. What's it got to do with me? Excuse me, there's one bloodstream. If the left hand's infected, you're in trouble because you're all one thing. So the Ritva is taking it a step further and saying, we're all one thing. So if this limb over here hasn't heard Kiddush, that limb has to care about it because you're all one thing. So that means that the mitzvahs have a built-in social dimension. When I think of a Kodesh Baruch Hu giving the mitzvah of Kiddush to me, in a certain way you could put it this way, the mitzvah of Kiddush is act so that the Jewish people fulfills its Kiddush responsibility. It's built into it. That's a requirement for everybody. And that being the case, the social nature of the mitzvah is one which applies to every mitzvah in that way. And that being the case, you have the answer to the Gemara in Psachim that the Kohen will have to do the Korban Mechus Kippurim for the Jew because of the same thing, because he's responsible for the Jew's mitzvah as well. Well, this creates a different picture of how a Jew lives in the world doing his mitzvahs. He lives in the world doing mitzvahs as representative of the Jewish people. Now, not only so, if we have time, I'll give you some examples where there's a counteracting principle. Life is complicated and subtle, but the idea does carry out that mitzvos have an inherent social dimension. Let's take prayer with a minyan. As you all know, there are certain things you can only say with a minyan. Why is that? Well, the Gemara learns it from a double Gzera Shava. We learn it from 10 of the 12 spies who brought back an evil report about the land of Israel, and they're called Ada Harazos. They were killed by Kodesh Baruch Hu. I heard from Rabbi Yeshivat Ohr Somayach in Boston. Why are we learning the idea of 10 for things of holiness from the 10 evil spies? Why would that be the source for the idea? And he said one aspect is this. What is a spy? What does a spy do? There's certain places that are restricted, there's no cameras, and he takes a photo. That's not enough to make him a spy. A spy is an agent of another government who's acting to undermine something in the local government. That is to say, The spy is carrying out a national action. He does it representing a nation. If country A discovers spies from country B investigating their materials, country A could drop bombs on country B. It's an act of war. So that's what the Torah wants to tell you. When you have 10 Jews praying together in a minyan, you become a representative of the Jewish people. You're like ambassadors. So if an individual goes and knocks on the door, who are you? Joe Smith from Iowa. Sorry, we're out to lunch. If he comes and says, I'm the ambassador of the United States government, and you're knocking on the door in London to the Home Secretary of the British government, he better open his door. Otherwise, it's going to be an international incident. When 10 Jews come before Kodesh Baruch Hu in prayer, they represent the Jewish people. Kodesh Baruch Hu has commitments to the Jewish people that he doesn't have to individual Jews. So, that being the case, it makes a big difference whether you have the 9 other people in shul that you're davening with or not. When there are 9 others, you're not davening as an individual. You're davening as part of a group that has ambassadorial status. The status of your tefillah changes because there's a built-in group dimension to tefillah. And this has a very interesting application in halacha, which Rabbi Soloveitchik taught us. We have a din of Shomei Ka'ona, like we mentioned before. If one person makes Kiddush, other people can listen and be satisfied their obligation of Kiddush, right? What about prayer? Suppose someone doesn't know how to pray. Can he listen to somebody else praying and satisfy his obligation? No, he cannot. He can only do it when there's a minyan and there's Chazaras Hashatz. Why is that? Why would prayer be different from all other mitzvahs of speech, which only require one? Because, as the Soloveitchik stressed, there's a difference between tefillah be-minyan and tefillas ha-minyan. Tefillah be-tzibur means you are together with other people and you make up a tzibur. Tefillas ha-tzibur means it's the prayer of the tzibur, a single prayer of the whole tzibur. And that's where you can ride on the prayer secondarily and listen and be satisfied, because you join together with the tefillah of the tzibur, not the tefillah of an individual, has an entirely different status. So again, there's a social dimension built into the prayer itself, which shows you that you're not functioning as simply as a detached individual. One other example I want to give you. The Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah says the following. I'm leaving out a little bit, but it's the trend that I want. A man is obligated to teach his son Torah, and then secondarily he's obligated to teach his grandson Torah, and then third level he's obligated to teach all the students who he's capable of teaching, to teach them Torah. And then a person should hire a teacher for his son if the circumstances require it. And then it says, someone whose father didn't teach him is obligated, listen carefully, to teach himself. Chayiv v'lamed es atzmo. And this is a quotation from the Gemara. Gee, if I were writing those laws, I wouldn't write it that way. I would say someone, father didn't teach him, is obligated to learn Torah. Doesn't say that. He says, chayiv to teach himself. Why does it say it that way? And then, come to think of it, Talmud Torah. What does the word Talmud mean? Let's take some parallels. Tanchum Avelim, comforting mourners. What's the root from which Tanchum comes from? What's the verb? Tanchum is a noun, not a verb. To what? Le? How do you say it in Hebrew? Lenachem, right? Lenachem is PL. Tashlum schar, paying someone's wages, right? Comes from the verb le shalem, which is PL, which means to pay, right? So Talmud Torah would come from the verb lilamed, which means to teach. Which means the correct translation of Hilchos Talmud Torah is the laws of teaching Torah, not the laws of learning Torah. Learning is what we would call the asymptotic case. Learning is teaching yourself, but it's teaching. All you're doing is teaching. Why? Because Talmud Torah is inherently social. It's inherently person to person. In the limiting case, you play both roles, but there are two roles. And that means that the emphasis, that's why the first mitzvah is to teach your children, and the next mitzvah is to teach your grandchildren, and the next mitzvah is to teach all the people who you can teach. In order, you should have talked about the qualifications for teaching, how much you have to know, and how many years you have to have spent. So, no. Teach. And then someone who wasn't taught teaches himself. The whole idea is a social idea. And I believe this is part of the reason why Ramah says in Hilchos Talmud Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, what happens to a person who can't learn? He has too many responsibilities, or has a disability, whatever it is. So he can pay other people to learn. And Ramah says, and he has a kiyum of Talmud Torah by paying other people to learn. Why would that be? If someone can't put on tefillin, he pays somebody else to put on tefillin, that does not give him a fulfillment of the mitzvah of tefillin. But with Talmud Torah, yes. Well, if the mitzvah is teaching, the mitzvah is to make more Torah knowledge in the world. And when you pay people to learn, you're making more Torah knowledge in the world. So there's an expression of the essential idea of Talmud Torah in doing that. So again, Talmud Torah has in it an essentially social element. So this is something which I think that left to our own devices we would not have appreciated. When you look into the sources, you see this, you see, looking at it, how it looks from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's point of view. Now, having said all of this, I want to point out at least one exception to the rule, which shows you that things are complicated, and I'll give you a model for the complication. What happens if some non-Jews attack a group of Jews? They surround them and they say, give us one of your number so we can kill him, and we'll let the rest of you go. Otherwise, we're killing all of you. It's a Mishnah Trumos, Gemara, several places. What are you supposed to do? So there it's quite clear, it's quite universal. You cannot give anybody over because you have no way of deciding whose blood is redder than somebody else's blood, who should be good, who shouldn't be that. Even though when the Goyim do it, they're going to kill everybody. And you could save a life, but you can't choose the life to save. And I heard from Rav Tzvi Kushalevsky, and I think I found later it was Rabbi Yonah, is Abazrayu the Ritzicha, to hand somebody over, for those who know what that means. Fine. Now, second case, more difficult case, they say, give us Ruvain. They name the person that they want. So you don't have to make the decision anymore, which one to give. And suppose that Ruvain is not guilty of any crime, so they have no complaint against him. They just want Ruvain, they want to kill Ruvain. So it's machlokes in the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. The Rabbi Paskins, you can't give him over even then. This is Abba's right, the Ritzicha. And that's quite remarkable. There are two alternatives here. Either Ruvain will die, or Ruvain and everybody else will die. So, Ruvain's going to die either way. So you don't lose anything by handing him over. Nothing. Ruvain isn't being victimized. He's going to die either way. That's why you can save everybody else. If the individual is nothing but a piece of the cloud, if he's nothing but a limb on the collective organism, like the Ritva said about Kiddush, you for sure would give him over. If a person has gangrene in his foot, you amputate the foot. Don't let him die because of the foot. What this shows you is that there is a cloud, and the person plays a role as part of a general group, and there is an integrated unity, but that's not all there is. Sometimes the individual's importance overrides the contribution that he makes to the community, and maybe the whole community has to be wiped out in order not to hand him over. Similarly, there's a Mishnah in Sanhedrin where you have a capital case. There are witnesses who are going to give testimony that the person committed a crime. And the judges say to the witnesses, listen, you're doing something that's very serious here. Someone might die. And Adam was created as an individual to teach you that each person should say, for my sake the whole world was created. And you're going to kill this person who is one for whom the world was created. Well, the Maharal asked the obvious question. If when you learn Sanhedrin, you didn't think of the question, it should teach you to learn Maharal. It says, Adam was the only person, see? So, of course, he could say, for me, the world was created, because there wasn't anybody else. But when there are millions or billions of other ones, the real truth is that it was created for us, not for I. How do I single myself out as only for me? So, it's not parallel. How could the fact that Adam could say, for me, the world was created, mean that I, together with others, I should say also, for me, the world was created? So Maharal says, you don't understand what it means. What it means is this. Imagine the creation process. Day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you have everything on board without a human being. Human being is the last thing to be created. What's it worth? What is the whole creation worth without people? Don't ask the wrong people. The answer is, it's worth nothing. Worth nothing. If it ceases to exist, nothing lost. Put one person in, and it becomes worthwhile. Because the world is a backdrop for the spiritual accomplishments of an individual, and contrary to popular belief, dogs and cats do not have spiritual accomplishments. So, what you're learning is the kind of thing a human being is. A single human being is the kind of thing that can take a whole creation that's meaningless and worthless and turn it into a creation that's meaningful and worthwhile. And this is what you say to the witnesses. You're giving testimony about this particular person. If the testimony causes him to die, there's a mistake here. You have killed the kind of creature that by himself could have made a whole world meaningful. Aha! By himself. So we're being told that by yourself you could do something without a group, without being a member of a larger group, an am, a minion, or whatever it is. Just by yourself, you could give significance to a whole creation. So the truth is that the picture is complex. Part of a Jew's life is the role he plays in the collectivity of the Jewish people, or of a minion, or other types of social groups. And part of it is the role that he plays in an individual sense. That makes life very complicated, because when your obligations to the collective and your obligations to your own responsibilities conflict, decisions have to be made. And then you have to go to really top decisors to get that answer for it. I think a model for this is cloning. Because you have trillions of cells in your body. All the cells have the exact same DNA. The reason that they play so many different roles is because the way the DNA functions is determined by epigenetic factors in the cell, which mask and control how the DNA expresses itself. So you have muscle cells and blood cells and hair cells and all the rest doing all these separate functions. But each one of them could clone something that would be genetically identical to you. So they have in common a program for the whole, even though they play very separate roles. So each cell has a dual identity. It has an identity as a specialized cell playing a particular role in the complex body, and it also carries the recipe for making a whole organism that's genetically identical to you. I think that's a little bit of a model, the role that individuals play vis-a-vis the community and the Jewish nation. Part of it is to be a specialized role, and part of it is to carry the significance of the whole in himself. So these are examples of how things look to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which isn't obvious to us. We wouldn't have thought of them on our own. And I hope that this will encourage you to try to think in these terms when you're coming across individual circumstances. Step out of the box and try to get the view of a well-informed Torah person. Yeah.
Does Kol Yisrael Regim mean that we're obligated to prevent another Jew from doing the same, just as we're obligated to help another Jew do a mitzvah?
Absolutely. In fact, that's where it's learned from. There's a pasuk in the Torah of a koshlu ish ba'achiv. The enemies will be chasing you, and each person, if I read it literally, each person will trip over his brother. Now, if you think about that, usually you trip over somebody who's already on the ground, right? So it can't be that A tripped over B and B tripped over A. That's not going to work, right? And even if there's a chain, okay, but then somebody starts the chain and somebody ends the chain. So what do you mean each person trips over his brother? The answer is because we have mutual responsibilities, and the Gemara uses this to say that if someone does a transgression and you could have stopped him in an appropriate way, and you didn't, you become liable also for that transgression. That's where it comes from.
Is that if he is even a frequent sinner, for example, he's a Russia, for example. If you know he's a Russia, but he's a Jew at least,
yeah.
And you have the opportunity to prevent him from doing an avera.
Okay, you asked a very subtle question, a very specific question. Rabbi Eiselman showed me this in the Note of Yehuda 40 years ago, where he asked this particular question, this specific question. A person has a habitual commitment to do a certain transgression, and does it all the time, and you could stop him on one occasion. Do you have any obligation to do that? Note of Yehuda says no. No. This guy eats cheeseburgers in the local McDonald's. And I can say to him, he'll trust me once, this week the meat isn't good, I'm telling you. You should have a cottage cheese salad this week. Next week, who knows what to do. And once he'll listen to me. Twice he will listen to me. He'll figure it out already. It's not, you don't have to do that. Because in his case, the meat is ingrained. It's not going to make that difference how many times he does it. It's the meat he's got to overcome. So I mean, the Yehuda paskins it that you don't have to do it. So that's not the kind of difference that you're responsible for. But if you could make him think twice about it, if you could convince him that he's allergic to milk and meat together, and it's going to shorten 5 years from his life, and that will get him to stop, then that'll be worthwhile doing.
Can you do that even if it's a lie?
That's an interesting question. I had this question once. I was going through a much longer sugya, and I asked my Rabbi Zatzal this question, and he said, suppose the only way you could save a person's life is to tell him a lie. What would you do? You tell him a lie, right? Oh, I said, okay, thank you, QED, right? My Rebbe was very smart, among other things. He was very smart. She said, well, what about his ruchnistic life? She said later, I read an article, and now they said they took it back. Retraction watch, unpublished it, so the idea of truth, where a person is doing something who's damaging himself, he's damaging his neshama. Right? Truth doesn't have to play when it's a lie, not about Torah. But you can't lie about Torah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So how does Hashem view us sinning? For example, when we succumb to the Yetzer Hara, even though we've been trying very hard against a specific avera that we might have an inclination towards, and we're trying very hard not to do that avera, but we eventually succumb to that avera. How does Hashem view our effort exerted trying not to do that avera, and then even though we do that avera, how does He view it? And isn't this a contradiction towards Hashem doesn't give us a test that we can't handle? If we tried,
so it's not a contradiction because you're not defining the terms correctly. The efforts that you make are all mitzvos and they're all successes. You will get reward for all of them. And the harder it is to do the right thing, the less liable you are for failure. Just the flip side of the harder it is to do the mitzvah, the more reward you get, right? So the harder it is to do the right thing, the less punishment you get for failure. But the answer to the question of you have the strength to pass every test is that not every obstacle is a test. And you use your scenario backwards. You use it to determine whether it was a test or not. And if it's something which you aren't able to overcome, then it isn't a test. So what you said before is true. It's true by definition of what is a test. There's a medrash which the Ishbitzer brings, which says Ruvain is going up to shear his flock, and Tamar is sitting there. He doesn't know who she is, and so on. Right? He thinks of her as a zona, and he thinks, "Oh, there's a zona there. Feh, disgusting. Ach." And he starts to walk by, and two malachim come and give him a kick. You're not getting out of this. You give him a kick. You're not getting out of this. Because Baruch Hu wants this. Which would mean he didn't have free will.
So that wasn't a test, it was just
That's right.
Hashem.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It wasn't a test. Sometimes the Kodesh Baruch Hu will put things in front of you because he wants that outcome.
Even if it's an Avera.
Yes?
So
Yes?
Hashem could facilitate you doing an Avera.
Well, facilitate. He puts these things in front because, let's say, he wants you to fail, and he wants you to learn from failure what the consequences are of doing an Avera, and thereby come to be opposed to the Avera in a stronger way. And you can always undo it because you do tshuva for the failure. So you don't know whether you could have or you couldn't have. You go through the steps of tshuva, and if there was some residual free will there, in other words, Akash Baruch can do it two ways. He can force you, or he can know what you would choose and put it there, and you'll choose it, and you're choosing it. And you are choosing it. He can arrange it that way also. A lot of what we do is arranged that way. There's really free will, and he arranges what he wants by putting in front of us the kind of choice which he knows we'll choose in a particular way. Right? But then we benefit from that. He wants it. He wants that outcome. Okay.